And we are live. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rod Saunders from Jew and Greek, and this is Friday, December the 13th in the year of our Lord 2024. And I have one little technical thing that I need to take care of here while everybody's coming in, so just bear with me a moment. Let's see. That. And that. And I think we're good. Okay, I'm not seeing. There's the comments. Here we go. Brother John Elving, good to see you. Connie and Observation Station, Ava Greenfeather. Catastrophic Cannon, Kentucky Girl. Welcome, one and all. This is another in the continuing series of my videos on the Daystar Dust Up. Hopefully, I won't have to do too many more of these. It's starting to get to me. You can only wallow in the mud so long, and then you got to take a bath and you got to move on to something else. But I think it's important at this point that we go through some of this stuff and hopefully learn some lessons. You guys hearing me okay? I'm trying a few new settings. You might notice the camera seems to be working a little bit better. There we go. Now I can hear myself in my earbuds. As many of you know, Marcus Rogers did an interview with Joni Lamb this week, and it took about a half a day for him to upload it. He had some problems with the upload, and then finally, like 12 hours after it was supposed to go up, it finally went up, and he left it up for a day, and then he took it down. And so before I go any further on, I want to read to you what Marcus Rogers said before we get into this video. After he took that video down, let me see if I can share this. There we go. So now you guys, hopefully, no, that's not what I wanted. I want that one right there. Okay. So he says, hey guys, I made a mistake. I apologize. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. My past was sexual abuse in the church, cover-ups and trauma, and seeing it firsthand made me jump the gun before I got the facts. As far as my comments on Susie, yes, it was a voice recording. The issue is why allow it to be posted now, and why are we doing these things after the money is gone and the position is gone. I looked at all of the evidence and I saw something that was very alarming to me. I don't think the daughter got put first. When I saw both sides, it just seems like what they said happened to the daughter wasn't a priority until they lost their jobs. The priority seemed to be becoming president and getting back on TV. I saw all of the text and emails, but my opinion doesn't matter. I was wrong. I should have stayed out of it. But for them to release audio and recordings after losing jobs and money, and if you look at the timeline, there wasn't a lot of fighting for the daughter, but vacations and everything else. I'm sorry it didn't look good. I'm sorry it didn't look good to me. But as I said, my opinion doesn't matter. I prayed about it, and I realized I made a mistake. God will judge it, and nobody will escape justice. I ask you guys, give me grace. Only reason I made this post is because I believe it's fair to address it. I made a mistake. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't informed. I wasn't qualified to get involved. God will judge it and being justice. So You go back here. So that's Marcus's statement on it. So my comments are not going to be directed toward Marcus. Okay. Marcus is in the video, of course, because he's interviewing Joni Lamb. But my focus is going to be on the things that Joni was saying and how they relate to the whole story as it unfolds. I'm not just doing this for views, for subscribers and stuff like that. If I wanted to do that, I'd be doing 2 or 3 videos on this a week because it's getting a lot of traffic. But I want to try and contribute something to the discussion. And I think there's a lot we can learn from these things. People need to learn, Christian people especially, need to learn to use critical thinking skills, to consider all possibilities. And when you consider all the possibilities, there's an old philosophical saying is when you eliminate everything that's not possible, then the only thing left must be true. Or when you eliminate everything that's untrue. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it all comes from the philosopher Descartes, who said, I think, therefore I am. He was doing this philosophical exercise to determine whether or not he exists. And he said, what if everything is an illusion? What if my family, the people I know, the trees, the grass, the house I live in, what if everything is just an illusion? Is there such a thing as reality? And he started saying, yeah, maybe some ogre in the sky somewhere created all of this deception and gave me the illusion that I'm living. Maybe those trees aren't there. Maybe these people aren't real. And so he eliminated everything that to him might not be possible. And the one thing he couldn't deny was that he was thinking. And he says, that is a reality I can't deny. I am thinking. And that's why he said, I think, therefore I am. It's not just a goofy philosophical statement. It's the product of a philosophical exercise. Eliminate everything that's not possible, and whatever remains must be true. And I kind of take that approach when it comes to issues like this. I want to look at all the possibilities and then try to determine what might be true, what is true, what's not true. And a lot of people just have a tendency to think in a very binary way. It's either this or it's this, but there's always a myriad of possibilities. And that's kind of the way that I want to approach this. So let me pull up the video and we'll get started. Let's see, video file. Where is it? I know I got it there somewhere. Oh, I turned it off. Sorry. In the words of Brother John Elving, I'm an amateur YouTuber. So sometimes I'll fumble around trying to figure out what I'm doing here. Okay, so the first one is at 9:12. So let me find 9:12 in this video. And let me know if you guys can't hear this. And I'll try option number 2.
At the beach, and on this particular day, my grandson was talking about his city view because they're the two older grandchildren. They were up in a room. It was a long bunk room, and there was a bunk bed on one side, and then there was another bunk bed on the other side.
You hear that okay?
So, my grandson was talking about his sister had the beach view, and he had the city view. And so
thank you.
Calling Pete heard my grandson talking and said, oh, I like the city view. And because everybody else was saying they like the beach view. I like the beach view. And so he said Pete was holding his 1-year-old child. And he said to my grandson, well, show me your city view. So they went up the steps. I was in the room, heard this, and went up the steps and proceeded to look out the window to see the beach view and then to see the city view.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. She's talking about when they went to the beach house where this alleged SA incident occurred. The guy they call Pete wanted to go look at the city view at the beach house, and the others liked the beach view. Now, I lived in Florida for 7 years. I've been to the beach lots of times. I've been to Vero Beach. I've been to West Palm Beach. I've been to Melbourne. Let's see. Oh, I've been to Tampa, St. Augustine, Jacksonville, Panama Beach, or Panama City. I've been to a lot of beaches in Florida. Very few beaches really have a city view. Maybe Miami, if you have a beach house in Miami, but because Miami has a beautiful skyline, and Tampa does too. But other than that, most of the beaches in Florida, the city view is going to be a road running by the beach house. And it'll probably have some hotels, restaurants, maybe a convenience store or a surf shop, that kind of thing. But there's not a lot of city view stuff happening on the beach. And like I said, unless you're in one of those two large cities. So that sounds implausible to me, that there would be a choice between a city view and a beach view. Besides, you don't go to a beach house to look at the skyline of the city. You go to a beach house because you want to look at the ocean, right? I don't know. Call me cynical, skeptical, whatever. But that just sounds kind of far-fetched for somebody who's lived in Florida. And I think they were in Florida. Pamela says, I think city view was a child's understanding, so it could be as simple as a building versus the water. Now, that's possible, but the thing is, Pete said he liked the city view too, and Pete wasn't a child. So what's going on there? I don't know. But when I heard that, she said the same thing in her Joni's Table Talk. When she described this incident, she said the same thing, the city view versus the beach view. Who goes to a beach house to look at the road on the other side of the beach? Or even the skyline. If it's at night, you might, well, I guess even in the daytime, if you have a city like Miami, it might be worth looking at the city view. But most of the places that I've been in Florida, there ain't much of a view on the opposite side. So that was just the first point that I wanted to address. I'm not saying she's lying, but that's one of those things that raises your eyebrows, and I don't know about that. So let's move on to the next clip now. I have notes and everything, guys. I'm really prepared tonight. Okay, 10:10.
Arnie was up there on her side of the room and put her bathing suit on. Well, downstairs, Susie said to my son, go check on. I remember thinking it's kind of weird.
That's what I wanted to cover right there. You hear how it jumped? Let me play that again. You'll hear a jump like there was an edit.
Her side of the room and put her bathing suit on. Well, downstairs, Susie said to my son, go check on. I remember thinking it's kind of weird. Like,
see how it jumped from go check on my son, and then she skipped. There were people who were saying, oh, there's an edit there. They edited it. They're up to something. But that is a very awkward edit. I've done a lot of video editing, and I would never do an edit and leave it like that. I don't think that's an edit. I think that's a glitch that occurred during the upload. I think Marcus probably had this thing edited much smoother, and he was having problems with the upload previously. I think there was a glitch that occurred during the upload, and it left out about a second or so of the video. I don't think that there's anything sinister, but people get into conspiracy theory mode and they see things there that aren't really there. So I wouldn't get too worked up about that. All right, let's go on to the next point. 1129.
The way she, in a few minutes, and he had said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was putting on her bathing suit. But a 5-year-old will just take her pajamas off and put on a bathing suit when you're at the beach." But again, the part that was left out was that he was holding a 1-year-old fussy baby, and my 8-year-old grandson was standing right there.
Okay. So she's bringing up the fact that it was left out of the Julie Roy's report that he was holding a 1-year-old baby and that the little girl's brother was in the same room. Now, after Joni brought that out in the Daystar or the Table Talk video, Julie Roy's corrected what she had written on her site. And then Marcus interviewed Susie and Jonathan, and Susie acknowledged, yes, he had a baby and the brother was in the room. But she said, we didn't want to bring that into it because we didn't want to give away his identity or something like that. And she said it was a non-factor. Well, if it's non-factor, why'd you leave it out? If you think that that doesn't change your narrative, why didn't you include that? Why did you give Julie Roy's information where you left some of that out? It looks like they're trying to promote a certain narrative and make him look more sinister. I'm not saying that's the case. Maybe the guy's guilty. I don't know. But why leave that out? That doesn't bode well for their credibility. And this is not just me saying this. All parties now acknowledge that he went up there with a baby and that the girl's brother was in the room. So that's a problem for Susie and Jonathan. But wait, there's more. We'll go up to 1510 now.
I was in the room, and yeah, it was devastating. I thought he was going to live another 25 years, and the whole family was heartbroken. So we went through that together. Lots of amazing friends and family and ministers from around the world, and but Marcus had left strict instructions that if anything were to ever happen to him, that he would want me to be the president of Daystar, because obviously we're the ones who built Daystar. Actually, God's the one who built it, but we're just the caretakers. And so I assumed that role.
Okay, so at this point, what I want to do is pull up the email that Marcus Lamb sent to everybody, and we'll read through it. Okay. I don't know if you guys, it's kind of small print, but here, I'll give you the link if you want to go and take a look at it. Marcus sent this August the 10th, 2021. I had somebody tell me the other day that Marcus's last words were that Jonathan would be his successor. If anything happened to him, he wanted Jonathan to take over. Well, that's not true. Here's what he said in the email. This is an important directive for me to each of you who are so important to me and so important to Daystar. Since I am older than Joni and since women historically live longer than men, I will probably go to heaven before Joni. Now, I am not planning on leaving anytime soon. As a result, I work out with weights, all that stuff. So if I precede Joni in death, then my directive is that Joni will replace me as the head of Daystar. I further direct that if Joni passes or retires, then Jonathan Lamb will become the head of Daystar. So he sent this out 3.5 months before he passed. And all the speculation about who was designated as the successor, it's right there in that Adobe Acrobat document, the PDF document. So anybody who's saying, well, Jonathan was supposed to take over. No, Jonathan's supposed to take over if Joni is out of the picture and Marcus is out of the picture. But he was not to succeed Marcus as long as Joni was alive. So that's that document. Let's go on to 1610. I'll have to pull this back up now.
As president, to do it. And so they said, no, Mom, we've got to do it. So think about this. We decide to go, and Jonathan, Susie, the kids, Pete and his wife and child and me, we all go to the beach. And I remember when we got to the house, Pete and his wife picked their room out, and Jonathan and Susie picked theirs, and there were bunk beds not far from Pete's room. And Jonathan and Susie said, oh, we should, let them sleep there. And I remember Pete came to me privately and said, hey, after all the craziness that happened last year, please don't put them on the floor, because I don't want something to happen where she's putting on her bathing suit or something. So I said, no, let's move the kids down on the first floor with you. So we did that. But there was not a word said about any sexual abuse or something happening. I mean, there was nothing.
Well, some would say it's strange that they would go on another trip with you guys. Some would say it was strange that...
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. The point I wanted to address here is that Susie addressed this on Twitter or X. See if I can find it. I thought I had the link to it. Okay. So we'll come back over here. We want to stop that. And there we go. All right. Here's what she says on X. There was no city view. It was a plain road. We believed an investigation was done and Pete was cleared. We found out about the cover-up 2 years later. In those 2 years, we were kind and did not treat them badly. So what Joni is saying here is that it seems odd to her that they would go along with all these family vacations and get-togethers for 2 years if they had a problem with it. Susie is saying, no, I didn't go along thinking that something had happened. I went along thinking that it had all been cleared up and that Pete was cleared and he wasn't. And then she said the same thing. There was no city view. It was a road. Now, is Susie telling the truth? I don't know. But like I said, I've been in Florida. I lived in Florida for 7 years. And I find it hard to accept that city view explanation. So it seems like Susie is kind of confirming my suspicions there on that. But again, this is all speculation. I'm considering all the possibilities here. It's possible everybody's lying. It's possible nobody's lying. They just have a different perspective on what happened. Or it's possible that one party is lying, the other's telling the truth. That's all a part of the process of trying to get to the truth. Okay, so now we go up to 1806. I'm going to stop here in a minute and chat with you guys a little bit.
I mean, you believe that Pete is just innocent?
There was no evidence of anything. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I've had to tell people, because this has been so shocking to walk through this, is I tell people, if I don't have time to sit here and tell you the whole story, I say, just ask the Lord about it, because the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of truth. But do I believe he's innocent? Absolutely. And when all of this came out, because there was so many other things that happened before these accusations resurrected themselves through Susie. and Jonathan. But Pete willingly took a polygraph, and the polygrapher was someone that is an independent polygrapher here in our area.
They said it was your husband who gave them.
Yeah, see, that's a lie.
Okay.
But I mean, you'll just see lie. I mean, throughout this whole story, you'll see parts left out, and you'll see.
Okay, that's not exactly true. They didn't say that Doug Weiss, Joni's husband, they didn't say that he took the polygraph. I found it, and here's what Jonathan said. Jonathan wrote in a statement to the Roy's Report that Joni Lamb's new husband, sex therapist and Daystar host Doug Weiss, owns a polygraph company. Given Doug's extensive knowledge of polygraphs, I believe these findings can be easily manipulated, Jonathan wrote. A polygraph company linked at Weiss's counseling webpage is Honest to Pete Polygraph. The company states on its FAQ page that it does not conduct polygraphs centered on sex offenses. Also, according to lawinfo.com, lie detector tests have questionable reliability and are generally not admissible as evidence in court. The Roy's Report specifically asked Daystar if Doug Weiss had administered the test and requested documentation of the findings, but Daystar did not respond to our request. Well, she's responding now. She's saying, no, he didn't take the test. It was somebody else. I'll let it play a little bit further here.
Lies. And eventually, I tell everyone, truth always wins. It always wins. But this polygrapher was one that was a forensic polygrapher that actually would deal with pedophiles. And so they asked Pete, would you take the test? He said, absolutely. And so he took the test, asked some awful questions. You can imagine what this is doing to him, destroying him, even the.
Okay, so she says that they got somebody who was experienced with pedophile polygraphs to take the test, and that nobody ever claimed that Doug Weiss, and from what I can see, nobody did claim that Doug took the test, that Doug did the test. They just said that he owned a polygraph company, which is apparently true, and they believe that the results can be easily manipulated. So they were just kind of implying that maybe Doug had something to do with the positive or the negative results. But she's saying, no, Doug had nothing to do with it. So I just wanted to put that out there. Again, who's lying? Who's telling the truth? Don't know, but you might as well get both sides before you arrive at a conclusion. Kentucky Girl says, does this mean that Pete is Rachel's husband? That's been speculated, but I don't have confirmation on that. So I ain't going to say nothing because I don't want to get slapped with a lawsuit. Let me go back a little bit. Okay, Jared says, audio volume on the video is very low to me, struggling to hear the video audio compared to your mic volume, Rod. I after I read that, I boosted it up a little bit. Can you guys hear it better now? Let me know if you would. She should have included all of it, left nothing out. She left like he was in the room with just the child. Yeah, that was kind of my feeling, was that Susie messed up there by not giving Julie Roy's, because I would imagine Julie Roy's, she's pretty professional. She's pretty thorough on this stuff. And that, she's a stickler for details. And for her to get a detail like that wrong, I'm assuming that the information that she was given was wrong. Pastor Michael Grant, I can't believe Marcus treated John and Susie like that after sitting down with them and going and I guess doing that interview seems like a stab in the back. I don't know when you got here, Pastor, but I read through Marcus's apology. He said that he was in over his head. He should have stayed out of the whole thing. He apologized. He took down the video of the interview with Joni, and he just chalks it up to stupidity on his part. So I'm extending him a little grace here. But I do think that what Joni said, was revealing, and that's what I'm focusing on here in this live stream. Claiming he was receiving messages from God didn't help. That's true. That's true. That didn't help the situation at all, because he got one kind of vibe from one group, and then he got a different vibe from a different group. That's why we go by evidence. We don't go by feelings and vibes and sensations. And I'm charismatic. I believe that God speaks to us, and I believe in the witness of the Spirit, but I also believe in using the brain that God gave you and using critical thinking skills. And, that's why the name of my site is Jew and Greek, because we need that understanding of empirical data, and we need revelation from the Holy Spirit. Let's see. Kentucky Girl says, oh, already did that one. Okay, thank you, Flame. She wanted to leave the child out of it. Yeah, that's what she said. That was the reason that she didn't give that information, but she brought the child into it in a lot of other discussions. So, don't know. Yeah, Marcus may have unintentionally got himself involved in the investigation. I don't want to be too hard on Marcus. He is what he is. Excuse me. Marcus has just always been this way, and he gets himself in a lot of trouble sometimes by thinking that he's hearing from God when he maybe is not hearing so clearly. But like I said, you've got that in the charismatic Pentecostal world. You've got people who are too prone to the supernatural, and you have other people who are too closed to the supernatural, and you got to try to find that balance. In my opinion, it really doesn't matter what Marcus Lamb said about Daystar, because once he died, Joni is now the authority, and that's all that matters. Doesn't matter what Jonathan was supposed to have Joni as boss. That's true. And what Marcus Lamb said is the reason that Joni Lamb is the boss, because he put her in charge in the event of his demise. Okay, I don't know that, so I'm going to issue a disclaimer. The views expressed by Observation Station are not necessarily the views of Rod Saunders or Jew and Greek. Okay, so I think we're all caught up on the comments, so I'm going to get back into the video here. 2010. Appreciate your patience, guys. I'm getting faster with this, but
I did hear one more thing, because there's a narrative that they're trying to paint about. One thing that was said was that you told Susie that she was the reason Marcus was sick, because she's coming with these allegations and things like that, and she also said that you had offered to make her the Daystar president one day. So I just want you to respond to that, as you feel that.
Wait, she said that she was the reason that Marcus was sick?
Yes. So one of the things that she had mentioned was, because her bringing these allegations and talking about a cover up, that your response was like, this is your fault. Look at what you're doing to this family, and then after that, somewhere she mentioned about you offering for her to be the Daystar.
It's a complete lie.
All right.
That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I never, ever said that. And Susie would have never been president, ever. I mean, that's crazy.
okay. I think Marcus was confused there. I don't think Susie ever said that. Susie later clarified, I think on X, she said, I never said that. I never said that I was going to be president. I'm not qualified to be president. So I don't know where Marcus got that. I think he misunderstood something that somebody said, but I already read to you Marcus Lamb's email designating Joni as second in line and then Marcus as third in line. Maybe that's maybe she said something about Marcus being in line and or Jonathan being in line, and Marcus took it wrong. Too many Marcuses here. You got Marcus Lamb, Marcus Curtis, my friend, Marcus Rogers, the guy doing the interview. So if I get confused, you guys extend a little grace to me. But anyway, I think, and this was one of the complaints about Marcus, was that he really didn't know enough. He didn't follow this story close enough to do an adequate job on this interview. And I think Marcus realizes that now. So, I'm not bashing him, but for other people who may have been under the same impression because of things that Marcus had said, I just wanted to clear that up. Okay, on to the next one. 2249. Okay.
Friends for a while, and then it turned into more. But I surrounded myself with people in the ministry that I trust. And of course, me being an interviewer like you, I ask him a million questions. And so I went to people that I trusted and said, hey, I know I'm in a position where people are watching. I want to use wisdom. And I'd like for you to come and help, us walk through this relationship. And so they all said, well, we need to meet him and talk to him and find out what his story. And so they did. And they all came back and said, we understand his situation. And we believe there is a biblical reason. And we're good with you starting the dating process, but just kind of slow it down.
Okay. Now, I already did the video on the Jimmy Evans connection, and I covered a lot of this in that video. But one thing I think that you need to consider here is, well, I'm going to just show you a picture of Doug with his shirt off. Okay. This is Doug Wise. He is a gym rat. He's a fitness buff. Okay, he's over 60 years old, but he's ripped, as you can see. Now, consider this. And I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I'm just going to throw this out there. This guy has a doctorate. He's got money, a successful business, doing his psychology, sex therapy, marriage counseling, whatever. He's got a successful business. He's got money. He's fit, educated, and he gets divorced. He's back on the dating market. Usually a guy in that situation is going to go after a younger woman, right? He's a good catch. And instead, he goes after a 63-year-old widowed grandmother. And that just seems odd to me. Unless you consider the fact that, all right, maybe he just felt they were very compatible because they both had an interest in television and counseling or whatever. But it does make the whole thing seem very suspicious to me. I don't know Doug. I don't know Joni. I don't know all the particulars, but that, I've been around I'm older than either one of these. I'm older than Joni or Doug. And you very rarely see a guy in his situation go after a woman who's almost a senior citizen. I'm not saying it never happens, but it is curious, is it not? Just wanted to throw that out there for you guys to chew on. Let's see. We'll go back to the... Okay, 2353.
I'm here in Dallas. So people are always going to have opinions about this. And the thing is, just like what you said, I know what his story is. God knows what his story is. and these people that I surrounded myself with know his story. So I'm not going to tell every detail of his private life or what happened, because it's nobody's business. At the end of the day, Marcus, I just have to know that I'm being obedient to what God is telling me. And so
now the problem with that is that again, we're all charismatic. Well, we're not all. I probably have a few cessationists in here, but most of my viewers are charismatics. The people at Daystar are charismatics. Sometimes charismatics have a tendency to go by what they feel God is telling them, and they lose focus of what the Bible says. I believe God speaks to people today. I believe that the gifts of the Spirit are still in operation, but everything has to be in agreement with the Word of God. And this was the problem that Jonathan and Susie had. As the Word says, if you divorce somebody for anything other than sexual immorality, you're committing adultery. And then the Apostle Paul said, don't divorce. But if you divorce, remain unmarried. And he said, not I. This I say, not I, but the Lord. Paul made a point of saying, this is what the Lord says. Don't divorce. But if you do, don't remarry. So you have a problem with what Paul said. You have a problem with what Jesus said. So when Joni says, I know what God told me, well, okay, that's one of the problems that we have in the charismatic movement is people are hearing from God in a way that's not consistent with the Word of God. And that's why I did that video on that. You know, the Bible doesn't say anything about addiction being biblical grounds for divorce. It doesn't say anything about emotional abuse or emotional abandonment being grounds for divorce. You're opening the door for everybody to get a divorce if you put this loosely defined expression out there, emotional abuse. And so this is a problem that I have with Joni's account on this. She's saying God brought Doug into my life, but the Bible doesn't seem to support what she's saying. Maybe I'm interpreting the Bible wrong. Maybe I'm in over my head. But, you know, I've been around a long time, and I've studied this subject. I think we give people far too much wiggle room when it comes to divorce. We have too many divorces in the church. You expect divorces in the world, but the church, we're committed to God and His Word, and we need to take the institution of marriage seriously and understand the commitment that's involved. All right, let me go back to the chat box here. Just joining the live feed. Can you recap from beginning? Marcus Lamb died when? Circumstances. Marcus Lamb died November the 30th, 2021 from complications with COVID. 2 months later, Doug Weiss filed for divorce from his wife of over 30 years. A few months after that, he and Joni started dating. And I think in the summer of 2023, they got married. So from the time that Marcus died until they got married was about 18 months. And then shortly after they got married, Joni brings him on the program. And he's sitting there doing the show with Joni like Marcus was doing 2 years earlier. And that was a problem for the kids, as you could imagine. And according to Joni, there was no adultery on either side in Doug's marriage. They just couldn't work it out. They just irreconcilable differences, I think is what they call it. So those are the circumstances, as best I can tell you. Love your channel, Rod. Thank you for offering a platform for light discussion on current events in church. It's helpful. Well, I appreciate the support there, Pamela. I hope you feel that way a year from now when I'm doing something completely different. Scripture twisting, bullying him, not letting Jonathan talk, treated him like a disobedient child. Yeah, you're not referring to this video, I guess you're referring to the Julie Roy's audio, which there's definitely a lot of intimidation and gaslighting going on in that. I may get to that next week. And thanks for saying what I've been thinking for weeks, sir. Well, you're welcome. And you're welcome to our live stream. Good to have you here. I don't remember seeing you before. Okay. Could care less about the beach front view. Nobody cares. Not the point. Well, it isn't the point except for credibility. That's the only reason I brought it up. Is that a credible explanation for what happened? It just didn't sound very credible to me. Kentucky Girl says, "Watch out, Rod. Some of your audience is older women." I don't mean to offend anybody, but that's just reality. A guy in Doug's condition, physical condition, financial condition, with a doctorate, successful business, semi-famous because he's on Daystar a lot. He's considered a good catch. And younger women would probably be very interested in a guy like that. Instead, he goes after a 63-year-old grandmother. Just one of those things that makes you go, DW acts like a narcissist. Been thinking that for years. I haven't watched him for years, so I didn't know anything about him until this story broke. But he does. He's an odd duck. I've watched videos of him, and I just don't get it. Phony baloney. Joni went to Chris Reed for advice. Yeah, I'll be talking about Chris Reed a little bit more in the future. City View goes toward the honesty of people involved. So, okay, yeah, that's what I just said. Jimmy Evans is an incompetent. Okay, I ain't going to say that, but I did that video on Jimmy Evans because I felt it was necessary to show how bad marital advice can lead to a mess. That was the reason that I showed it. I don't have any fight to pick with Jimmy Evans, but I feel very strongly about this. You know, there's just a few institutions that Jesus implemented: the church and marriage. And you got to take it very seriously, or I should say God. God created the institutions of the church, Israel in the Old Testament, and the institution of marriage. It's a sacred thing. Marriage is a sacred thing, and people take it so casually with such a cavalier attitude. And we've got to make a correction in how we look at marriage. People repeat patterns. This man she just married is a womanizer. He is into the flesh. He left his first wife. He'll leave Joni probably, or at least have other relationships. Well, that remains to be seen, but that is a possibility. Like I said, we're considering all possibilities here. I just did that one. She claims to be led by God, but has heretics all over her network. Well, some of these people I don't consider heretics. The other people consider them heretics, but I talk about this a lot on my channel, is that heresy is defined as a violation of an essential doctrine of the faith. Like denying the deity of Jesus, that's heresy. Denying the resurrection, that's heresy. Denying justification by faith, that's heresy. There's a lot of people on Daystar with questionable doctrines and questionable stories that I don't care to listen to, but I stop short because to me, I have a very high bar for heresy. I don't consider a lot of things heresy that other people would, but there are people I would not put. If I had that network, there are a lot of people on there that would not be on there anymore. But then your revenues would probably go down. That's why the networks, the Christian television networks that don't have a wide audience, are the ones that don't put those people on their programming. And so you have to make a choice sometimes. Am I doing this for ministry, or am I doing this as a business? If you're doing it as a business, anybody who throws money at you, you'll put them on the air. But if you're doing it as a ministry, you're going to have standards. No, we don't agree with what you teach. There was a channel in Orlando, Florida, when I lived there back in the late 80s, early 90s. And they put a guy on there on Sunday morning. He'd come on, I think it was Sunday morning, might have been Saturday, but he was from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And all this guy ever talked about was how you're supposed to go to church on Saturday. That's all he ever talked about. And you're not saved if you go to church on Sunday. That's a pagan practice, yada, yada, yada. And this guy, he was a charismatic, the guy that owned that station. You know, he was not a Seventh-day Adventist, but this guy was willing to pay for airtime, and so he put him on. And people would complain about it. And he said, well, I believe the church, the body of Christ will sort all that out by the ratings or whatever. I didn't agree with him, and I still don't agree with that. I don't agree with putting people on the air just because they've got money to buy airtime. I think you got to have standards. Okay, let's get back to the video. 25, 22. I've got to back it up just a bit if I can.
It's the
All
same
right.
as Jesus if he had did it. So obviously, if there's other things going on, 9 times out of 10, that stuff is going on. So I don't really judge when it comes to that. I give grace. At the end of the day, everybody's gonna have to stand before God. One thing I want to ask you, and if you're comfortable, talking about this, it's another thing that people are mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Holy Spirit is here as our witness and all of that. Are you comfortable letting people know, like, we did it the right way? There was nothing going on before behind the scenes. Yeah, I just want to. Give you
absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I mean, you had mentioned about something about an NDA.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes.
With that his ex-wife had signed an NDA. It's a complete lie.
Okay.
And Susie has made comments about his ex-wife. She's never had a conversation with his ex-wife, and Doug and his wife, ex-wife, were working with a judge and divided everything. It was amicable.
Okay. The point I wanted to bring out here is, first of all, there was a rumor that they paid her $2 million. Doug's ex-wife, Lisa, they paid her $2 million and had her sign an NDA. So she can't talk because she signed an NDA, and she won't get all the money, I guess, if she starts talking. That was a rumor, and she just said, no, that's not true. She did not sign an NDA. She's just not talking because she doesn't care to talk about it. The other point is that Susie's story was that not that she heard from Lisa. Susie's story was she heard from Joni. Joni said that she was upset because Lisa was trying to get Doug back. And this is after they started dating. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But it is true that Susie said that. And Susie didn't claim Doug or Lisa as her source. She claimed Joni as her source. Joni was the one saying that she was upset because Doug was having to deal with his ex-wife wanting to get back together. So, but Joni didn't mention that. She didn't mention anything about that discussion that she had with Susie. That's where Susie got it, allegedly. It's from Joni. Allegedly. Everything I'm saying here is speculation and based on allegations. Don't sue me because I'm just, don't shoot me. I'm just a piano player. If you don't remember, it was an old Elton John album. Okay, let's see. Let's see, 2949.
A team, husband and wife team. And so when I let Susie know that he would be co-hosting with me, that's when the turn started. Okay. So then, unbeknownst to me, there was a lot of underlying stuff that was going on right before the wedding that I had no idea about. People getting involved, saying things. And and Susie and Jonathan all of a sudden decided we're not for this. If I marry, I'm out of the will of God, or that I'm committing adultery. So it just did a 180. But what was the difference? The difference was they found out that Doug was going to co-host with me. It wouldn't have changed their role at all. They would have still been at the top of the show. They would still host from time to time. They were doing a show called The Green Room. They would have still done that.
Okay. The problem here is that, according to Jimmy Evans, all of the kids were against the marriage at one point. And they all had a discussion with Jimmy Evans, and they gave their reasons. And Jimmy Evans said, I told you I'd pray about it, but, you know, I already knew that they were wrong. But he said, I let them all voice their opinions, but I knew they were all wrong. So according to Jimmy Evans, it wasn't just Jonathan and Susie. It was also Rachel and her husband and Rebecca and her husband. All 6 of them were against it. Now, the other 4 came around. You know, they went along to get along. But Jonathan and Susie didn't. And I think one reason that they didn't, according to Joni, it was because she started including Doug on the show. According to them, they found out the circumstances with Doug's divorce. So anyway, there's Faith on Fire. Faith on Fire Brian from Faith on Fire just did a video on this. And I like Brian. I like the points that he was making. He said that he thinks that there are no good guys in this story. And I'm inclined to agree. But welcome, Brian. Okay, so on to the next point. 3306. It's just not letting me back it up.
Started to host, and that's when
Co-host, yeah.
So I guess that we can talk about going into that leaked audio. By the way, when I did the interview, I didn't know that they recorded it and leaked it. I just heard it was leaked audio. So what do you want to say about the leaked audio? Everybody knows, like, of course, you don't want private family conversations going public like that, but what do you want to say about that?
Well, we had already several meetings with them, trying to talk to them, trying to, to reconcile any differences. And they wanted to argue at that point, from a theological standpoint, which, neither one of them have a Bible degree or have been seasoned in ministry or have preached a message, so.
Okay. You don't need a degree in theology to know that God hates divorce. You don't need a degree in theology to be able to read English when Jesus said, if you divorce for anything other than sexual immorality, you're committing adultery. You don't need a degree in theology to read what the Apostle Paul said about this I say, and not I, but the Lord. Don't divorce. But if you do divorce, remain unmarried. That's not heavy duty theology. We're not talking about penal substitution. We're not talking about perseverance of the saints or immaculate conception. We're not talking about deep theological issues that have been debated for hundreds of years. Okay. One of the things that the Protestant Reformation was all about is letting people, getting the Bible in the hands of people so they could read it for themselves, so that the average person could know as much about the Bible as the people in the church, so that the people in the church couldn't manipulate them like they were in the Catholic Church. And it seems like some of these people want to use that same approach the Catholic Church used to use. Hey, we're the ones who understand the scriptures. You do what we say. You listen to us. We're the authorities. Hogwash. The Bible's the authority, and every believer has the Holy Spirit indwelling them, and they can read the Bible and understand what God is saying. For the most part, on the essential issues, not on the deep theological issues like, infralapsarianism versus supralapsarianism. Okay, who cares? But when we're talking about marriage and divorce and remarriage, I think people are making it a little too complicated. It's a sacred institution, and you have to take it as a sacred institution and not just go the way of the world and say, if it works out, great. If it doesn't, I'll just get a divorce. No, that doesn't fly. And so what she's saying here is these kids just don't know enough. They don't have any theological training to understand these issues like Jimmy Evans and me, that we've got 40 years of ministry experience, both of us. Who cares? The Bible still says what it says. Okay, I'm getting a little worked up here. I'll shut up. 34:57. Oh, this is a good one.
Address that. I'm not the voice of God. I'm the voice of Joni.
You guys hear it.
But here at Daystar, what Jimmy was just making an analogy that I
don't know if you heard it or not. She said, I'm not the voice of God. I'm the voice of Joni. But Jimmy Evans, when he said she was the voice of God, he was just talking about the position of authority that she has. He was referring to Romans 13. I'll read that in a second.
am the voice of authority at Daystar, and that I would have the final say. And he said, you'll never understand submission until you disagree with it. And so they were disagreeing, like with reading the card. But, he was saying, if you can't submit to the authority that God has placed you under, then you just need to remove yourself out from under that authority.
Okay, I do agree that if you can't submit, then rather than hanging around and causing trouble, you need to go somewhere else. Whether they're right or wrong, if they're your boss, I mean, I worked in the corporate world for many years, and whatever the boss said, it didn't matter to me if it sounded stupid or what. He's the boss. He has the authority to fire me. So if he tells me to do something, I do it. I remember one night I was working the night shift in the data center. About 3 or 4 in the morning, the phone rang. And I answered data center, and he says, this is Pete Boylan. I need to get into my email, and I can't do it. What's the problem? Pete Boylan was the CEO of the company. And when I heard the name Pete Boylan, I sat up in my seat. He said, I can't get into my email. I said, well, we had a scheduled downtime. They're doing maintenance on the email servers. And he said, well, I'm in England. I've got a meeting in an hour, a $14 million or whatever acquisition is on the line. I've got to get into my email for my notes. He says, get those servers up. And I said, yes, sir. I didn't argue with him. I didn't say, well, you should have read your email. It's a scheduled downtime. What's the matter with you? No, he's the CEO of the company. He said, get those servers up. And I said, yes, sir. And I hung up, and I got in touch with the server guy. And I said, get those mail servers up. Pete Boylan needs to get into his email. That's all it took. When I knew I was dealing with the CEO of the company, I didn't argue. That's the way it is in the corporate world. Okay. Now, he was wrong. Technically, we sent out a notification that those servers were going to be down. So he messed up. It doesn't matter. He's a CEO, and you do what he says. So they're right from that standpoint. But here's what Romans 13 says. I think I pulled this up. Let's see. Now I'll go ahead and do a screen share so you guys can read along with me. Okay. It says, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. Now, this line about there is no authority except from God, they're using that. And they're saying this is talking about authority in the workplace. But if you read on, he says, for he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. He's talking about law enforcement. You're not going to see people at work carrying around weapons saying, get back to your cubicle or I'm going to shoot you. It's not talking about authority in the workplace. It's talking about governmental authority. Now, you could loosely interpret this as though, it does apply to church and to work and to the military and to whatever organization you're a part of. You have an authority structure. But the context really doesn't apply to all of those situations. He's talking about law enforcement. He does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore, you must be subject not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. Just do it for your conscience sake. Okay? Do it because you, as a Christian, you want to be a good witness and you want to be a good citizen, and you don't want to have any trouble with the governing authorities unless they tell you not to preach in the name of Jesus, and then you have to defy them. But if they say, park your car, turn your engine off, and roll the window down, you do it. Okay? You don't argue with them. You don't say, why'd you pull me over? Why'd you pull me? No, if the cop pulls you over, you cooperate. You say, yes, sir, no, sir. And you show him respect because he represents the authority that comes from God. God gives government authority over people. God has government within the kingdom of God. Okay? So that's what it's saying. For because of this, you also pay taxes. Okay? We don't like paying taxes, but he says pay your taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. Render therefore to all their due. Taxes to whom taxes are due, custom to whom customs, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Okay, so that's the context of Romans 13. And they're trying to say that applies at Daystar, that all these authorities, kind of in a sense, God establishes all authority structures. But it's kind of a loose interpretation of Romans 13 to apply that to Daystar. But I don't think that either Jimmy Evans or Joni was saying that they're prophetic or they're the voice of God in the sense that Moses was the voice of God before the nation of Israel or anything like that. I'm willing to cut them a little slack on that because I see what it's kind of a loose interpretation, but I kind of see what they're saying there. All right. 36:52. We're just almost done here.
So we just succumbed to that. We're like, it was silly. And so he came back and said, an email, gave us an email. I can show you the email that said basically, we're ready to come back and, want you to reinstate us. But we want a contract that says that Jonathan's saying that he's going to be president and that no matter what, that's ironclad. He's going to be president. And I can't even change my mind if for some reason I feel like he's not fit to be president.
He sent this email after the leak audio saying that.
And then he said at the end of it, this is where extortion comes in. He said, and basically, if you do everything we're saying, then I won't play or leak the audio of the private meeting that I recorded.
Well, that sounds like blackmail. I definitely would like to see that email. And with that being said, I want to ask you about something else they said in the interview because, like I said.
Okay. Yeah, that does sound a little bit like extortion to me. So at this point, I want to show you what Jonathan, what she's referring to here. This is another Adobe Acrobat file. Let's see. Okay. Requirements for Jonathan and Susie. We're starting with these are the requirements that Joni and Daystar issued, and I'll give you the link for that. Oh, thanks, Flame, for the super chat. I appreciate that. If I miss a super chat here and there, don't be upset with me because I'm trying to multitask here, but I do appreciate all the support that people give to this channel. So there's the link if you want to see the 13 requirements. And then they go on. And let's see. Come on, mouse. Work with me here. Okay, so this is Jonathan's response. Okay, I guess you guys can see that okay. He says, Daystar has always been our calling. For the sake of the kingdom and Daystar, we are willing to work to put this unfortunate episode behind us. The list of demands we received, however, are overreaching, inaccurate, and missing essential terms that we view as a prerequisite to moving forward. First and foremost, we agree that trust must be rebuilt and that it must be rebuilt slowly. We are committed to walking this path. Our convictions, biblical beliefs, and moral values are not going to be dictated, controlled, or otherwise impinged. This episode began because of Joni's need to control our biblical convictions to suit her personal choices. We will not compromise on our biblical beliefs and moral convictions. We are, however, willing to keep those beliefs to ourselves, and we can agree not to share our thoughts about Joni's marriage to Doug on air with our viewers, with staff, or on social media. To be clear, moving forward, we will only share and read statements on air that we approve and that is in line with the truth. Susie would never share and does not possess recordings of private conversations that was one of the 13 requirements. And he says she doesn't possess recordings of private conversations with Joni. Susie is owed a letter fully reinstating her to all of her previous roles at Daystar. During the meeting with Joni and Jimmy Evans, Joni purported to fire Susie and promptly removed her from all appearances on Daystar. This was petty, harmful, and disappointing action. A repair must be made. We remain willing to put this episode behind us. However, we also require security, transparency, and certainty about our future at Daystar. To achieve this goal, we would suggest that Joni, Daystar, and ourselves enter a new contract that clearly spells out my future role as president of Daystar, restricts the ability of Joni or any other officer or director from taking actions adverse to our employment without good cause, to be clearly defined, and without prior approval of a majority of the board of directors. In exchange for the agreement contemplated above, we will agree not to use, disseminate, or otherwise publish any and all audio recordings that could be harmful or embarrassing to Daystar, Joni, or our family. Okay. So, it sounds like if you agree to all this, we won't publish our recording. That sounds a little bit like blackmail. And this is what Marcus Rogers was saying there. It sounds like he was saying, hey, I've got this recording. I could publish it. It would be very embarrassing, very damaging to Daystar, but I won't publish it if you agree to all of our demands. Reinstate Susie and give me a guarantee that you're not going to fire me over some silly little, petty issue. And I think that was kind of when things broke down, was when they got the sense that Jonathan was trying to play hardball with them. And so, and this to me is where I kind of lose a lot of sympathy for Jonathan in this. It turned out he was recording all of this stuff. They didn't know it. They had like 14 hours of audio recordings, and he lied about it. They asked in one of the meetings, is this being recorded? And he said no, and he was recording it. And somebody the other day, I heard one of these YouTube, I don't remember which YouTube channel it was, but somebody was saying, well, in the Bible, Rahab hid the spies and she lied, but it was a justifiable lie. Corrie ten Boom hid Jews from the Nazis and she lied. So lying is not necessarily wrong. I think that's a stretch to compare recording a meeting of the board at Daystar to make a comparison to that and hiding Jews from the Nazis or hiding the Israelite spies in Jericho. I think that's a bit of a stretch. Jonathan wasn't hiding people from Nazis. Jonathan was lying about recording something. And he eventually produced all those recordings. So, in some respects, I agree with Jonathan and Susie. But then in some respects, I think that this thing was totally mishandled. And they've ended up, I think I'm going to stop there. I don't think I might cover one or two more points, but it seems like they've engaged in this scorched earth policy. You know what I mean by scorched earth. After the Desert Storm war back in the 90s in Iraq, we kicked Saddam Hussein's forces out of Kuwait. And as they left, they set all these oil fields on fire. And it was a mess. It took them months to get all those fires out from those oil derricks. The scorched earth policy is basically, it's a military strategy to say, we're going to just burn everything down. And then you can't have any transportation. You can't get any supplies in. You don't have any food. It's inhumane to just burn everything so that the people will starve to death or burn to death. That seems to be the policy with Daystar, is they've burned their bridges with Daystar, and now they're kind of trying to burn the whole thing down. And I don't like that. And there's a lot more audio coming out. Now they may come out with a smoking gun eventually that just says, well, hey, everything that they did was justifiable. But at this point, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy when I see that they're not going back to Daystar. So why are they doing this? They're doing this just to hurt Daystar. And I've said this a couple of weeks ago. If Jonathan thinks that he can run a Christian television network, instead of just burning down Daystar, he should go put together a business plan, find some investors. There are a lot of people out there that love Jonathan and Susie. They'd probably give them some startup money. Go and raise $1 million, rent a facility, buy some cameras, hire some people, get whatever broadcasting license you need, and go for it. If you think you can do that, Marcus did it. Marcus Lamb did it. But Jonathan and Rebecca and Rachel, they didn't build this thing. Marcus and Joni built it. And they just walked into it. Okay. You might find it's a little bit harder to do than you thought. And so anyway, those are my thoughts on that. I don't mean to come down too hard on Jonathan and Susie, but at some point you got to wonder, what is the end game here? What is it that they're really trying to accomplish other than just hurting people? They're not going to improve their situation. They're not going to be employable. Jonathan's salary at one point was $250,000 a year. And one of the things that I read, they cut his pay from $250,000 a year to $150,000 a year. Now, where else is he going to go and pull down that kind of salary? Let's see. Well, why go to Julie Roy's? Yeah, I think I'm just going to end there. I've been going for an hour and 20 minutes here. That's pretty much the gist of it. Like I said, he took the video down the same day that he uploaded. I think it was the same day. And I got a copy of it before he took it down. And I just wanted to share it with people, let them know. There wasn't a whole lot of new information that came out. She repeated a lot of things that she said in her Table Talk video. But I do think that it yielded a few little nuggets here and there to give you a little bit better perspective on things. And maybe I gave you a little different perspective on things so that you'll consider all the possibilities. I don't know what happened here. I don't know who's lying, who's telling the truth. I don't know where this thing's going, but I will make a prediction. It's more of a non-prediction. I don't think anybody is ever going to be charged in child SA. I just don't think there's ever going to be any evidence come forward to get a conviction. I just, up to this point, they turned everything over to the police. No charges have been filed yet. Nobody else from the families come forward to corroborate anything. So I think, I don't think that they're necessarily lying about it. I think that they just let their imagination carry them away to make certain conclusions that were not based on facts. And I hear a lot of people say, well, you're forgetting about that child. This is about that little girl. Everybody's talking about all this other stuff, and nobody's talking about the little girl. And that's what this is all about. Well, no, it isn't. It isn't just about that little girl. I'm sorry. I know you probably believe that, but it isn't. If it was just about that little girl, we wouldn't be talking about security guards, armed security guys coming to the door. Which, if you look at the video that Julie Royce produced, you can see on his right hip, that guy is packing heat. He's got a gun. We wouldn't be talking about NDAs. We wouldn't be talking about $100,000 honeymoon. We wouldn't be talking about putting trackers in cars. We wouldn't be talking about the issue of divorce and what's a justifiable cause for divorce. We're talking about all of these things because all of these things have been brought into the discussion by Jonathan and Susie. So, that's one thing that I agree with Marcus Rogers on. It isn't just about that little girl. But people lie about child abuse every day. It happens. And I read a comment somewhere, somebody said, nobody lies about child sexual abuse. Yes, they do. In divorce court, child custody court, every day people lie about stuff. Ask anybody involved in domestic squabbles, law enforcement. They have to go in and deal with the domestic situations. People lie all the time. So you have to, and I'm not saying that Jonathan and Susie are lying. I'm just saying that is a possibility that you have to consider. You're not considering all the possibilities if you don't include that. And once charges are brought and somebody's tried and convicted, okay, you can eliminate that from the discussion. But until charges are brought, as far as I'm concerned, that's still a possibility. Oh, one other thing I wanted to cover. Let me pull this up. 3803. This really got me.
On their car, and someone came to their door with a gun, like the Daystar Mafia. So I want you to just, address that before we go to the last thing.
Well, I'm sure they were completely safe because no Daystar employee was following them. There was nobody with a gun coming to their door that I know of or that I put up to doing it.
Okay. So she says, no Daystar employee was following them. Now that, to me, see, I listen to the way people word things, and she's parsing her words there. No Daystar employee. That doesn't mean that she didn't hire somebody, a private investigator, to follow them. It doesn't have to be a Daystar employee to be working on her behalf and be compensated by her. Why didn't she say nobody that I paid or that I have any knowledge of was following them? She could have done a categorical denial. Instead, she parsed it by saying no Daystar employee. Well, that's not the question. The question is, did you hire somebody to follow them? That's a possibility. Another possibility that I think you have to consider is maybe Jonathan hired somebody to pretend to follow him and videotaped it to make his mother look bad. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I mean, who pays a guy to follow them in a purple car like that? I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't know who's lying, who's telling the truth. But when I hear somebody parse their words like that, that makes me very suspicious. And the tracker thing, that's another thing. I'm not even going to play the clip on this, but her explanation for the tracker was her dad used to work at Daystar, and he was elderly and he had dementia, and he got lost one day driving a Daystar vehicle. somebody got his ID and they called them and they went and got him. And after that, she said, we put trackers in all the Daystar cars after that. Well, Jonathan and Susie are in their 30s. They don't have dementia. That's the reason. Well, then she went on to say, well, we put trackers in the cars for various reasons or for a number of reasons. Well, a good follow-up question at that point would be, would keeping track of where Jonathan was and who he was talking to, would that be one of the reasons? But she didn't elaborate on what those reasons are for putting trackers in cars. I can understand putting a tracker in a car if your dad has dementia. You don't want to have to issue a silver alert to find the guy. But that wasn't the case with Jonathan and Susie and their sisters and his sisters. Just a lot of things aren't making sense. And I think both sides are trying to push their narrative on this thing. And it's sad that it's come to this. But it's like I said, Brian from Faith on Fire, he said there's no good guys in this story. And I tend to agree. You got $100 million a year coming into this organization. And when you got that kind of money at stake, people will do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. It's just human nature. So it's sad, but it's true. This is what happens when you get this kind of money involved. And, if this was a $1 million a year organization that had assets of maybe $3 or $4 million, it wouldn't be like that. But this is an organization, supposedly, according to Marcus Lamb, it's $1 billion organization that brings in $100 million a year. Well, who wouldn't fight to get control of that? Who wouldn't fight to hang on to control? That, unless you're led by the Spirit. You remember the story of Abraham and Lot? Abraham was a man of faith. And Abraham's servants and Lot's servants were fighting. And Abraham says, we're family. Why do we want to fight? You pick out whatever part of the land you want and you take that and I'll take everything else. And so that's what they did. Lot said, oh, cool. I like this part over here. So he took that land and his servants went with him and they were all happy. And Abraham took the rest of the land. Abraham knew that God was going to bless him no matter what the land was like. He wasn't putting his faith in the land. He was putting his faith in God. And, when you're in a situation like this, if you're in faith, you're not going to be resorting to some of the things, the petty things. You're not going to be putting trackers in cars. You're not going to be parsing your words like this. When you're in faith, you just put your trust in God. And you just trust God to bless you and take care of you, protect you, and guide you. And I would like to see both parties here come to an amicable agreement, work this all out like Abraham and Lot did. And I'm gonna close with that. I'm gonna answer a few more questions, catch a few more comments, and then wrap it up. The guy that tagged Jonathan's car is the one that came to his door, I heard Jonathan say. Yeah, I think I heard that too. I don't know if that's the case or not, but, he would know, presumably. Notice how she does not look either Marcus nor the camera indicates her potential of deception. I didn't notice that, but eye contact is something that you look for to determine if somebody's being upfront with you or not. I understand the ethics of Jonathan's demands to Daystar, but it also exposes that he has no real life experience with anyone in real world business. Based on Blackmail, Jonathan is not rehirable. That's true. Who's going to want to hire the guy after seeing what he's done here? He's going to have to start up his own thing, as far as I can tell, or just take a diehard Jonathan and Susie supporter. Maybe they'll give him a job. Joni is a control freak. That's why all the cars are owned by Daystar. Well, all the all the management cars, as I understand it, all the management cars are owned by Daystar, but they've got hundreds of employees there, so not every car, but yeah, Jonathan's car, Rachel's car, Rebecca's car, Joni's car, and probably the people on the board are issued cars. I don't know. Well, that's another thing, is the board. The board consisted of Tom Callender, Joni, and Jonathan. 3 people on the board. In a $1 billion organization, they should have had at least 6 and probably more like 9 members of the board. This is just messed up because he's an employee at the same time he's on the board. And so this is one of the conflicts that they have. She's his mom, she's his boss, and she's a fellow board member. And that's just a messed up, ma and pa operation. They always ran it this way, I guess, and the organization got bigger and bigger, and they kept running it like it was a small operation. I remember years ago, there was a church where the pastor, when he took over the church, it was a very small church, like 50 people, maybe 100 people. And the pastor took 50% of the offerings as his salary. And if you put it in modern day dollars, say they brought in $2,000 a week. Well, he took 1,000 of it. And his wife worked at the church. His son helped out and everything. And they're all living on $1,000 a week, okay, in today's dollars. But as the church grew, instead of bringing in $2,000 a week, now they're bringing in $10,000 a week. And so he took his 50%. It's $5,000 a week. Well, $5,000 a week is $250,000 a year in modern dollars. And the people in the church said, wait a minute. You can't be taking that much money in a church of 500 people or whatever it was. And he said, well, that's the way we've always done it. I take 50% of the offerings as my salary. And they said, yeah, but the church was small when you started doing that. The church has grown since then. And you shouldn't be taking 50%. Anyway, he felt like he was justified in doing it because that was the agreement 20 years earlier when they started. But as the church grew, it seemed like an exorbitant salary. And so there was a lot of tension in the church, and the man finally just resigned, and they brought in a new pastor who was willing to do it the way that the church wanted it done. And I see a little bit of that here with Daystar. They're running it kind of a Mickey Mouse operation as far as the board is concerned. If you listen to some of these conversations in the board meetings, that is messed up. Board meetings aren't supposed to be run like that, where people are gaslighted and intimidated like that. But that's what you get when you have a 3-member board and the CEO decides to bring in the heavy artillery to beat up her insubordinate son. So anyway, those are my parting thoughts. Let me see. Do you agree both Joni and Jonathan should step down from leadership and be owners only to rectify the situation of Daystar's future? Well, that's an interesting proposition. I don't know who would run the thing if they both step down. Tom Callender? I'd hate to see that guy. If you don't know who Tom Callender is, he's 3rd member of the board. He talks like Foghorn Leghorn. If you remember Foghorn Leghorn, the cartoon, I got my feathers to keep me warm. Well, that's the way Tom Callender talks. He's got this heavy Southern accent. And he says, now listen here, son. You got to do things the right way, son. Jonathan, you better shape up there, boy. Oh, he's a joke. Guy. But again, it's a Mickey Mouse operation. It's a $1 billion organization, but they're running it like a mom and pop hardware store. That's just not going to work. Marcus and Joni Lamb taught their kids nothing. They used donations to lavish lifestyle on kids and taught them no character. Jonathan is not mature enough to be VP. Start small and learn to be a real. Okay, that's where it ends. Yeah. It's an old saying that Your gifting may take you places where your character can't sustain you. From what I understand, Jonathan is a very gifted administrator. In the last board meeting that I listened to, they were all talking about how that was his gift. He had the gift of administration, and he knows those expense reports. He's on top of the accounting. He knows all the personnel and all the different departments and everything, but he doesn't have a good on-air presence like Marcus had, and like Joni has. Even Rebecca and Rachel, they're better on air than Jonathan is. Susie's good. Susie's good on air. But Jonathan's thing is not on air presentation. His thing is managing things behind the scenes. And they all said that he did a good job for them until this whole Doug thing happened. And Joni says it brought a lot of things to her attention that the Lord wanted her to see. Well, maybe the Lord wants her to see some things about herself too. Just another possibility. Joni, Lamb, and Marcus stole money from people under false pretenses and lived lavishly. I think God, I wouldn't accuse them of stealing without evidence. But there's no question that they were very prosperous as a result of this. Now, Joni says that Marcus was a brilliant businessman and he made a lot of money just with investments through the years. And that's possible, but you also have to consider that he might have made a lot of money from his salary, from donations. But like Brian from Faith on Fire pointed out, the number one revenue stream for a Christian television network is not donations, it's airtime. People buy time on the network, and that's their number one revenue stream. And then the second one is donations. And he had some people buying a lot of airtime. Airtime is not cheap. I used to work for a company that handled a lot of broadcasting stuff, and I talked numbers with a guy there one time. And yeah, these places that are buying a lot of airtime, they must be bringing in a lot of money because they're spending a lot of money to buy that airtime. So anyway, well, guys, my voice is giving out. I've been at it for an hour and a half now. I hope you got something out of this. I'm not trying to bash anybody. I'm trying to provide some clarity and some context on some things and that maybe people can learn from about critical thinking, about getting all the evidence before you come to a conclusion one way or another. Jesus said to judge with righteous judgment and not by outward appearances. And so many people are just jumping to conclusions like Marcus Rogers did without getting all the facts. And I've said right from the start, let's wait for the facts to come in. And the facts are coming in now. And I don't see it being about that little girl. I see a power struggle. To me, that's what this is all about, is a power struggle. And all of these other factors are just, devices being used in this power struggle. So anyway, I thank you, Brother John Elving. He said, hit the like button. I appreciate your support there. He's been covering this a lot too. We don't agree on everything here, but we have to be willing to cut each other some slack, I think, because we're all going to have a different perspective on certain aspects of this story. There is so much. I tell you, one of these days, somebody's going to make a movie about this or a mini series on television or Netflix or something, because this is such a huge story and it has so many moving parts and so many personalities. Look for somebody to do an HBO special or something on the Daystar scandal. Or maybe they'll say based on a true story. And then in the movie version of it, they eventually find out that Marcus was murdered. Marcus Lamb was murdered. Now, I'm not saying he was. I'm just saying, if I was going to write the script out for this thing, I think that's as a fiction, as a novel, I think I would write it out that way. And just, wouldn't that be interesting to see, who killed Marcus Lamb. And I shouldn't be making fun of it or anything, but it's turned into a circus. Let's be honest. This thing is a total circus, and it's an embarrassment. And I'll be glad when we can move on to more productive things to talk about. Anyway, thanks for joining me tonight. If I didn't get to your question or comment, I'm sorry. I'm a one-man operation doing the best I can. And please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next Friday night live stream. God bless.